Hello everyone. This is the second lesson on the nervous system and it follows the work that we did last time on conscious or voluntary actions. Today we are going to find out what a reflex action is and why they are so important. As always, if you can complete the retrieval practice questions, pause the screencast, have a go at them, try your best, and then when you've finished, unpause and we will go through the answers. Okay, so here are the answers. Number 1, which part of the cell contains DNA in a eukaryotic cell? That is the nucleus. Remember, a eukaryotic cell is something with a nucleus in, so a plant or an animal cell. Number 2, which process happens in the mitochondria? That is respiration. So that would be, if we're being really specific, it's aerobic respiration. So it's the respiration that takes place with oxygen. Number 3, you should have put carbon dioxide in the first gap, glucose in the second one as a product. So the left-hand side, water and carbon dioxide are reactants, glucose and oxygen are products. Number 4, what moves through the xylem of a plant? You should have put water and minerals. Number 5, which type of blood vessel have thin walls and carry blood towards the heart? They are veins. And number 6, the second gap, you should have put receptor cells or receptors, and the last gap you should have put response. Number 7, the type of neuron which sends electrical impulses from the brain to the effector are the motor neurons. Number 8, the receptor cells found in the eyes are light receptor cells. Number 9, those in the ears are sound receptor cells. And number 10, what does your skin respond to? Pressure, temperature, and touch. Okay, remember, you should have marked those with a green pen. Any that you got incorrect, make sure you do when you do a little bit of biology revision. Okay, so moving on. Now, I'm going to briefly talk about neurons, which is, as I said before, is a biological term for a nerve cell. And what a neuron does is carry electrical impulses around the body and connect different parts of the nervous system. So last time we talked about the central nervous system, which is your brain and your spinal cord running down the centre of your body. And then from that, you get the peripheral nervous system, which is around the side. So the word peripheral means around the side of. So around the edge of, we've got neurons. So neurons are part of the peripheral nervous system and they carry messages to the spinal cord and the brain and then back from the brain and the spinal cord to your different organs, to your glands, to your muscles, all around your body. Okay, so the neurons carry electrical impulses around your body. Now, there are 3 that you need to know of, 2 of which you have heard of before. So the first one is a sensory neuron. Now, the sensory neuron carries electrical impulses from the receptor cells to the brain or the spinal cord. They're really long and they are covered in what we call a myelin sheath, which acts as insulation. Okay, so in other words, it stops any of the electrical impulse being lost as it moves along, which allows it to happen really, really quickly. If that myelin sheath wasn't there, some of the electrical impulse would be lost on its journey and the impulse either wouldn't get there or would get there too slowly, and therefore we wouldn't be able to respond to our environment. Now, if you have a look in your knowledge organizer, you will find more information. You'll find the images of these neurons. So you should be able to then look at these in a little bit more detail, but make sure you recognise things like the nucleus, because often pupils are caught out when they're asked what this is in an exam. It's like a black blob, like we would normally draw in a normal cell, but it's still a nucleus, it still contains DNA, so make sure you know the structure. Okay, now the next one is a motor neuron, which carries impulses from the brain or the spinal cord to the effector. Now remember, the effector is either the muscles or the glands, and again they've got a nucleus but it's just in a different part of the neuron. And again, they're very long, covered in a myelin sheath for insulation, and they have branched endings, which means the messages can be sent to different cells. Okay, now moving on, we have got the relay neuron, which we haven't talked about yet, and it's only found within the spinal cord, and the relay neurons are part of a reflex, which is what we're going to talk about today. So the relay neuron is in between the sensory and the motor neuron, but they are only found in the spinal cord, and they are only involved in reflex actions, which is what we are talking about today, and which is why you haven't heard of them before. Now, please make sure that, again, you look in your revision guide, you look on your revision card, you look in your knowledge organiser about these neurons, and learn their structures. Make sure you recognise them in an exam. Okay, you'll never be asked to draw them, but you might be asked to label an axon, or you might be asked to label the nucleus. So make sure you can recognise those parts on the 3 different types of neuron. Okay, moving on. So just something else before we get on to reflexes. You have to know that a gap between 2 neurons is called a synapse. So when the impulse moves along a neuron, it gets to the end of a neuron, and remember, it is an electrical impulse. Now, that electrical impulse cannot jump across the gap. Okay, so that electrical impulse cannot move from that neuron to the next one. So what it has to happen is when the electrical impulse turns up at the end of a neuron, the electrical impulse actually stimulates what we call a neurotransmitter. So those little dots here are what we call neurotransmitter, which is a chemical. Okay, so the chemical moves from a high to a low concentration, a little bit of B1 revision there for you, which is called diffusion, attaches itself onto the next neuron, and then it causes the next electrical impulse to start. And then it will get to the end of that neuron, where another neurotransmitter will be released, attached to the next neuron, and so on. Okay, so if we look at the labels there, A would be a neuron, B is the gap, so we call that a synapse, C is also a neuron, D would be the neurotransmitter or the chemical, and then E would be the electrical impulse carrying on along the neuron. Okay, so make sure you've drawn these, so you might want to pause the screencast now, draw the synapse, label it, and make sure you put a little bit of a description of what is happening. Okay, moving on. Just to check that we've got what we've just done so far, can you have a go answering these true or false, and then pause the screencast, and then when you finish we will go through the answers. If you do think they are false, have a go at correcting them. Okay, try your best. Okay, question number 1. A gap between 2 neurons is called a reflex. That is false. A gap between 2 neurons is called a synapse. Number 2, a chemical called a neurotransmitter passes across the synapse. That is true. Number 3, there are 2 types of neuron. Now, we found today that that is incorrect. There's 3, so the sensory, the motor, and the relay. Number 4, the motor neurons send messages back to the effector. That is true. And number 5, electrical impulses can pass across the synapse. That is false. Remember, the electrical impulses stimulate the neurotransmitter, so it's actually the chemical that diffuses across the synapse. Okay? Any that you got incorrect there, make sure you go over and try and embed them in your brain. Okie dokie. So moving on to what reflexes are. So what is a reflex action? Why might it be important? So looking at these images here, you've got a lady having a light shone in her eye. You've got a doctor performing what we call a knee jerk reflex on a patient. And then we've got somebody who's touched a hot pan. Now, hopefully that will make you think of what a reflex is. Okay, so a reflex is something that is automatic. So that means you do not think about it. It does not involve your brain. Okay, you do not get a choice in the matter. It happens automatically. Now, it's important because they keep us safe. Okay, so they protect the body from harm. So if you could jot these 2 sentences down, please. Reflex actions are automatic reactions. The brain is not involved in a reflex action. They occur to protect the body from harm. Now, it's not okay to say that reflexes are fast, okay, because all nervous responses are fast. Reflexes are automatic. They do not involve the brain, and they happen immediately to protect you. So if we didn't have a reflex in our eye, if too much light was able to shine into our eye, it would damage the back of our eye. So our pupils get bigger and smaller depending on how much light they're being exposed to. If we touch a hot pan, if we didn't move our hand away straight away, it would damage the nerves in our hands. So we move away straight away. Okay, so these are things that protect our body from harm. So luckily, they're not that much different than the actions that we've done before. So you still get the receptor here. You would still have the stimulus, which would be the Bunsen burner. The receptor in the hand, the temperature receptors in the skin would feel the heat. The sensory neuron sends the message this time to the spinal cord. That's where it's different. So it doesn't go to the brain this time. It goes to the spinal cord where there is a relay neuron. So this bit here where I'm putting the cursor now, that is the bit that's different. There is a relay neuron in the spinal cord. What then happens is the message is sent along the motor neuron back to your muscles in your arm for your arm to be moved away automatically. Okay, now it doesn't go to your brain because you're not thinking about it. You're not making a decision. Your body has to react automatically. So the message will go to the spine and then straight back to the effector. Okay, so there's still a stimulus, there's still receptors, there's still sensory neurons, but this time it goes to the spinal cord instead of the brain. Okay, still passed by the motor neuron, and there is still an effector, and the response would be to move the hand away. But this is the important bit here, the relay neuron in the spinal cord, because the relay neuron is only involved in reflexes. I try and remember that, the R and R rule. Okay, reflexes, relay, and that neuron is found in the spinal cord. Just notice that the brain is not involved. Okay, so here's another example of a reflex. This reflex is really useful when you're walking. Now, if you had to think about your muscles contracting every time you walked, you wouldn't get very far, okay? And we would be staggering about, we'd have to think about moving our muscles for each step, which wouldn't be very useful. So you can actually do this if you cross your knees and then just with the side of your hand, find the middle of your knee. Your leg at the front should just move out, as you can see on that image. Okay, now all you have to do is just with the side of your hand gently tap it and you should see that knee-jerk reflex. Now that is the reflex that actually enables you to automatically walk without thinking about it. We don't think about every step we take because it is an automatic response. It is a reflex. Okay. Here are some other examples of reflexes. So touching a hot pan, your biceps contract and will pull your arm away to stop your hand being damaged horrendously. The next one will be sand blowing in your eyes. So your muscles in your eyelids contract, making you blink to stop the sand getting in. And the last one's a bit different because it exposes you to a stressful situation. So this time, instead of a muscle being the effector, a gland is, and it's your adrenal gland, which will release adrenaline when you're exposed to a stressful situation, which increases your heart rate, and it means that more glucose and oxygen are delivered to your cells, which means there's a higher rate of respiration, which means you can release more energy. Okay, so there's some examples of reflexes. Okay, last thing for this lesson, I just wanted to show you this diagram. This is something that diagrams like this always seem to come up on exams, and students really struggle, first of all, working out what it shows. So I just wanted to show you, so if you do see it in an exam, you can recognise what you are being shown. So, you know, obviously you can see the hot tripod, that's a thumb or a finger there. Okay, and then these are part of the nervous system, but it's this bit that people really struggle with. This is meant to be sort of a cross section of your spinal cord, so it's as if you're looking down onto the spinal cord. Okay, so if you see something like this in an exam, it's a spinal cord, which means it is a reflex response. So the words here at the bottom, we've got A would be the receptor cells, so the temperature receptor cells in the skin. The information then passes along your sensory neuron. Okay, there's a gap here, so that will be the synapse. Because it's in the spinal cord, the relay neuron, which is already labelled for you there, is involved. Then there's another synapse. Then you've got the motor neuron, and then the effector at the end, which is a muscle. So this shows a muscle. The only thing I wanted to point out as well was the nucleus there. So the black blob there being labelled, so C would be the nucleus. So this shows a reflex response. Okay, just wanted to show you that in case it comes up. Right, remember to look at your knowledge organiser and to enhance the work that we've done today using those. Thank you. Have a great day.